Well, good morning, good afternoon. Scott over at ReadySquirrel.com. Today I'm coming at you with what dried bean is the best for long-term storage. And this might be a little bit controversial. So let's get started. I hope everybody's doing well. It's Monday, so I'm dragging a little bit. I've been writing all day. So I'm going to try to stay upbeat and not monotone. That's my goal for today. Okay, so dried beans. What dried bean is the best for long-term storage? Dried beans are superstars in the prepping world. They're nearly the perfect survival food. Combined with white rice, beans provide all 9 essential amino acids and make a complete protein. But not all beans are created equal. In my estimation, if we're not looking at just shelf life, the best bean for long-term emergency storage is the soybean. 1 cup of boiled soybeans provides 298 calories, 29 grams of protein, 56 grams of carbohydrates, and 15 grams of fat. And that's the big one there. That's why the shelf life is going to be about half what it is for the average dry bean. So you get more nutrition with the soybean than in pretty much any other readily available bean. The soybean provides 9 essential amino acids. A dehydrated soybean will store for 10 to 15 years in number 10 cans. Here's 4 reasons to avoid soybeans in your emergency storage. Soybeans are more susceptible to oxygen because they've got that high fat content. And some people find soybeans unpalatable when they're cooked like other beans, i.e. boiled and eaten with salt. So though they don't have that going for them, what they do have going for them is they have that high oil content. So you can actually, you can actually make soy milk and stuff like that. I don't eat that stuff as a normal part of my diet, but it's something I'm considering because these things are so strong when it comes to their protein profile and the amount of fat that you get out of them. So you can't boil them and eat them like you can with pinto beans or lima beans or pretty much any of the other dry beans that we normally store for long-term storage. So if you think you want to try these out, again, purchase them in small quantities. Don't buy them in bulk. See if you like them. See if you can incorporate them into the soups and stews, and see if it's something that you would actually use. This is the one I don't like. This is the one thing that holds me back. Soy has what's called phytoestrogens. I'm not a professional. I'm not a doctor, but it's all over the internet if you want to check it out. And there are actually some other foods out there that are pretty common that I was actually surprised. Which one really surprised me? Mint, fresh mint, has, they believe, causes low testosterone production in men and boys. There's a bunch of foods out there, but soybeans are one of them. That's kind of a turnoff. If you're thinking that, I'm agreeing. And then this is the other downside that sticks out. Soybeans don't have that 30-year shelf life, but still 10 to 15 years is pretty solid if you consider the nutritional profile of these bad boys. If you're going for a 25 to a 30-year shelf life, you can check out the 16 beans I have listed below. 17 beans that are excellent for long-term food storage. This is just a basic snapshot, a profile of the most common beans, the most readily available. Just about all of these beans, as you'll see down below, have a 30-year shelf life. Some of these are super common in the United States. Some of them are not. This is an Natsuki bean. Those are used quite a bit in Japanese cuisine. I was actually stationed in Japan, and I'd never even considered eating sweet beans, and then I got hooked on the stuff when I was over there. The Japanese use a lot of the Natsuki bean, sweet bean paste in their confections and their candy and their baked goods and stuff like that. And once you get a sweet tooth for it, it's pretty good. So Natsuki beans are similar to a kidney bean. You can boil them and put salt on them and eat them. But you can also do other things with them. I guess you could, I don't know, some of these other beans you may be able to do the same thing, but this bean is commonly used in Japanese cuisine, and they add sugar to it to make desserts. Kidney bean, pinto bean, mung bean, Dehydrated soybean. These beans are dried. The soybeans, to get that shelf life, you've got to go dehydrated. So it's a little bit off the beaten path, but it's something different that you can consider. Split peas, black turtle beans, black-eyed peas or cow peas, black beans, navy beans, lentils, lima beans, pink beans, garbanzo beans or chickpeas, cranberry beans, Roman beans, pigeon peas, and cannellini. That's like the Italian white bean you see in a lot of Italian soups. Information compliments of the USDA. How long will beans last in my emergency pantry? Excuse me. The shelf life of most dried beans is 25 years if stored properly in oxygen-free containers such as number 10 cans or Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers. And of course, the ideal storage conditions are 75 degrees Fahrenheit or less. In a dry environment. As with other foods, avoid clear containers to prevent light oxidation. And beans in store packaging have a shelf life of 2 to 3 years. So if you want these massive shelf lives that you're going to see down here, the foods have to be repackaged. All these beans have a 25 to 30 year shelf life if stored properly, minus the soybean. Which you're thinking, wow, you're saying that's the best bean. I'm saying it's the best bean in regards to its nutritional profile. I mean, honestly, the things that you can do with soybeans, you can just look it up. Everything from tofu to soy milk to meat substitute. There's a ton that you can do with the soybean. So to not at least consider it, I think is a little bit crazy. And I don't think the soybean is something that I would rely on solely, but I wouldn't rely on any of these beans solely. I would mix it up to get, because you can see up here, they all have a little bit different nutritional profile regarding calories. All of these are boiled. Calories per cup, grams per cup of protein, grams per cup of carbohydrates, and fat content. And we know that fat is tough to get, and if you consider how hard fat is to get in your diet, it's easy if you're raising livestock, if you've got chickens and they're producing eggs, but to get fat content and not be taking it from some animal product is somewhat difficult in a long-term survival situation. And a cup of soybeans, not only is it high in calories, but look at the fat in that. There's nothing on this list that even comes close. I think the next highest fat content on here, which actually surprised me, that's a pretty good bean to go with. The navy bean, 1.13 grams of fat per cup versus 15 grams per cup for soybeans. I mean, that is a lot of fat, so don't count it out. Okay, so just a simple list of shelf life there. 8 easy steps to perfectly cook dry beans, long-term food storage. You want to sort the beans. You want to rinse the beans. Bean to water ratio is a cup of beans to 3 cups of water or stock. This here is, again, controversial. You want to soak beans. They say soak beans because it cuts down on the gas. I have to be honest with you. I throw my beans in a crock pot a lot of times, my dry beans, and I don't soak them. And sometimes I do soak them. If I think about it the night before, I'll do that, but sometimes I don't. And honestly, I do think beans turn out better if they're soaked, or if they're prepared with, what's it called? I want to call it a double boiler. Anyway, we'll talk about that down below. So soak beans overnight, drain the soaking water, and cook the next day. There's a quick method: boil beans for 10 minutes, let cool for 30 minutes, drain the dirty water, add fresh water or stock, and then cook. Bring beans to a boil with high heat, reduce heat to low, simmer beans uncovered for 45 minutes. That's like the minimum you're going to get depending on how old the beans are. Drain beans or use the juice as a tasty gravy. I keep what am I trying to say? I keep the juice in my beans. I'm a big fan of white rice and beans, and I use Tabasco. And when I cook beans or when I cook lentils, if I use any of the fresh vegetables cut up that that I have in the fridge or that I have in the garden. Well, I don't have a garden anymore. Just moved to Florida. Had a big garden. Had a 3-acre yard with tons of fruit trees and on the East Coast. And now I have a small yard. And I have not figured out gardening here yet. I haven't had time. So I'm pretty sure that different kinds of sweet potatoes are going to be in the garden. But other than that, I'm not sure. Oh, wow, I got off subject. So simmer beans, uncover for 45 minutes. Drain beans or use the juice as a tasty gravy. I don't waste the gravy. I don't think in an emergency situation you would either. But 5 bean tips. Don't add salt to your beans. This is controversial. Don't add salt to your beans until they're cooked. It makes them tough. I follow that rule, but I can't say that. Okay, let me back up. If you have old beans, you got something in there in your emergency storage that your beans in your emergency storage that have been there so long that they're getting old and dried out, I would avoid putting any salt in them until they're cooked. It's just one more thing that can keep them tough. Also, when beans are cooked, add bouillon cubes or powder for additional flavor. I do that a lot too. I know the bouillon's not good for you, but I use it quite a bit actually with lentils and with beans. Process beans into flour and use as a thickener for soups and stews. So you can actually just throw beans in a regular blender and do it that way if you want to try it. 1 cup of dry beans will cook into 3 cups, so make sure your pan is big enough to hold the expansion. During stage 7, simmering of the beans, add fresh produce like chopped carrots, onions, or garden herbs for additional flavor. Wow, do I always get ahead of myself or what? It's actually kind of funny, but it's hard to not get ahead of myself a little bit, and at the same time not be completely robotic. I'm trying not to just read this and bore you guys, so I guess that's what you get. I'm going to be jumping ahead a little bit. 8 methods to soften tough beans. Old beans that aren't stored correctly, or beans cooked in hard water may be tough after they're cooked. So you can soak beans longer than overnight, which requires more water. So in an emergency situation, that's probably not going to be your best method. Boil beans for 10 minutes. Let them sit for 30 minutes before cooking. Add baking soda to your soaking water. I have never tried this, but I need to. For every pound of beans, add oh man, there's so many typos in here. For every pound of beans, add 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. Baking soda may reduce B complex vitamins, so that's a negative. It actually removes, I think it's thiamine. Am I saying that right? And don't use too much baking soda in this instance. More is not better because your beans will taste like soap if you go overboard. Soften in a stovetop pressure cooker or an Instant Pot. I mean, this is great for normal use, daily use, when you've got power and the grid's on. But I don't think those are great things to rely on in SHTF because you may not have power. And there are pressure cookers that you can use like on a campfire, but they're like specialty pressure cookers that are like super solid, like almost armored. You can't use a regular pressure cooker, stovetop pressure cooker on a grill or on a campfire. It'll explode, and you can't control the heat. That's what really comes down to. If I'm wrong, let me know. But everything I read was really definitely saying don't use them on a stovetop, or rather on a campfire. Simmer your beans for more than 45 minutes if they're super tough. Avoid adding salt or anything with salt in it until after the beans are cooked to tenderness. That's redundant. Avoid adding anything acidic to beans like canned tomatoes until after your beans are cooked. This one, you can freeze beans. So you boil your beans for 30 minutes, 3 cups of water to 1 cup of beans. Let the beans cool. Throw your beans in the freezer. Place frozen beans in a pot of water and let them soak overnight, and then cook them as normal. What is the fastest method of... I can't believe how many typos are in here. I actually wrote this article in one day, and that happens. I notice that I get a lot more typos. It's just hard to... Sometimes you miss stuff. It's better to write the article and then go back a couple days later. What is the fastest method for cooking dried beans? The fastest method for cooking dried beans is with a pressure cooker. It takes 25 minutes to cook 1 pound of dried beans. An instant pot will cook beans in 30 minutes, and traditional stovetop cooking takes 45 minutes to 2 hours, depending on how long the beans were pre-soaked. Which is better for long-term storage, dry or canned beans? The nutritional content's about the same for dried and canned beans, but dry beans are better for long-term storage because they're much less expensive. You get more calories for your money. They're lightweight. They take up less storage space. They have 0 sodium, and you can sprout them for fresh greens. So that said, dried and canned beans both have a place in your emergency food storage. 9 reasons to store canned beans. Canned beans include water inside the can, so you don't have to consider your emergency water supply when prepping. And 1 cup of dry beans requires 3 cups of clean water. That's a lot of water. So, especially if you're using like a hand pump or a hiker's pump to purify. Canned beans are immediately usable. Just open the can and eat. You don't have to cook beans, though they're not as palatable cold. You can't eat them that way. So also you don't need fuel. You can eat canned beans cold. You can stay hidden. You don't have to start a fire to heat them. If water is scarce or starting a fire is an issue, canned beans work well at bug out locations or in a bug out vehicle. Canned beans are too heavy to carry if you're bugging out on foot. I mean, I guess you could throw a can or 2 in there, but they're pretty heavy. So if you're in a vehicle, or if you're bugging in, or if you're storing food at a bug out location, then they're good, but I wouldn't depend on them for bugging out. Warming canned beans takes minutes. Prepping dry beans could take hours if you're filtering water, preparing beans, and gathering firewood. Cans are tough and self-contained. 6 reasons to store dry beans emergency food supply. Dry beans are the best option for bugging in or staying in place. Like what we said before, mainly because they're inexpensive and provide excellent nutritional value for the money spent. Dried beans are not the best option for bugging out on foot because they take time, fuel, and water to prepare. Dry beans are lightweight because they don't contain water. So if you have plenty of time, water, and fuel, you can carry them in a bug out bag. They're light enough. But think about the preparation time and water supply. Dry beans are much less expensive than canned beans. Dry beans can be sprouted for microgreens, so you get that natural microgreen nutrition. Some beans are better than others. I actually did an article on sprouting. I need to attach that here. It's got lists of which beans are best for sprouting and what the basic nutritional value is for each. They don't really microgreens don't give you calories. What they give you is nutrition. Dried beans, less storage space is required. You can grind dried beans into flour and use as a thickening agent for soups and stews. You control how much salt to add. Canned beans have a ton of salt, so that's just something to keep in mind. What can I do with all the beans in my emergency storage? Beans are extremely flexible food. There are so many recipes available, it would be impossible to list them. The following are 11 common uses for cooked beans. If you guys can think of anything else, let me know. Hopefully this list will get your creative juices flowing and help with your meal planning. So with beans, you can make soup, you can make stew, you can grind into flour as a thickener, you can grind into flour for baked bread, ground to flour for mashed flour or mashed. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. You can grind beans to flour or mash to create a dip for homemade bread or garden produce, and you can use as a filling for pastries and other food items. Of course, if it's flour and you're making a dip, or if you're going to use it as a filling, you'd have to reconstitute with water. Beans and rice, outstanding survival food. I think everybody should have beans and white rice in their pantry. Beans can just be boiled with salt and eaten. You can make refried beans. You can add to garden produce, and you can add to warm or hot salads. Fact, Japanese cuisine often includes sweet Natsuki bean paste for baked goods and desserts. Just a creative alternate, something you could look into. How do you store beans in long-term storage? If you're purchasing beans professionally packaged, the best storage method is hands down hermetically sealed number 10 cans. But for the average pepper, the best do-it-yourself method of bean storage is sealed Mylar bags, a food-grade bucket with a sealable lid, and oxygen absorbers. 6 reasons number 10 cans are the best storage method for dry beans. They're tough, hands down. They're probably the toughest, especially if they're stored properly. Yeah, you can't get them wet. That's about the only thing. You don't really want to drop them and dent them either. But for the typical long-term storage pantry, beans are the best. Number 10 cans are the best for beans. Number 10 cans keep light off your beans, preventing light oxidation. Number 10 cans are excellent at reliably holding an oxygen barrier. Number 10 cans have a food-grade enamel coating on the inside that keeps food from reacting with metal in the can. Number 10 cans have or hold a manageable amount of food. So once it's opened, you're not exposing a ton of food to air and starting that expiration clock ticking like you are if you open a 10-gallon bucket, because I think they hold, I want to say 35 pounds of beans. Cans are relatively lightweight compared to 5-gallon food-grade buckets. And remember, these number 10 cans, these are dry stored beans, so you don't have the water in there like you do if you've got like canned beans, canned in water or juice or broth. Fact, you may or may not have access to a canner in your area. Store-bought beans, commercially packaged, might be your only option. I don't have a cannery around me. I'm not LDS. I think that the canneries are much more available to someone if they're LDS. So you can do some Google research and see if you can find something in your area, because you may be able to pay a fee and go in and can your own stuff. But from what I've read lately, that they're actually LDS, Latter-day Saints Church, they're starting to do away with letting people can their own stuff. But don't take that for fact. You'll have to do your own research. So 8 reasons Mylar and food-grade pails are the best food storage for beans. This is more if you're a DIYer. Using Mylar bags or food-grade buckets individually isn't the best option for bean storage, but together they create a tough oxygen-free environment when used with oxygen absorbers. So 8 reasons. Quality Mylar bags hold a good seal, but they're delicate. They're easily damaged. Mylar bags alone are susceptible to rodent damage. 5-gallon food-grade buckets don't hold a great seal, but they aren't easily damaged. 5-gallon food-grade buckets are porous, so even if you get a seal on the lid, there's an exchange of air. Both Mylar bags and food-grade pails protect food from light oxidation, so you kind of get double protection. Food-grade pails alone hold 35 pounds of beans. This is a lot of food to expose to oxygen at once. When used together, you can choose smaller Mylar bags to store in the bucket, leaving the majority of the beans sealed. Mylar bags, food-grade buckets, and oxygen absorbers are readily available. Warning, beans stored in an oxygen-free environment must be stored at less than 10% moisture content, or food spoilage such as botulism can occur. Warning, don't store your beans in a container used to store non-food grade items, or if you don't know what was stored in them, or if the bucket is not food grade plastic. 7 reasons to store dry beans and white rice. This is kind of a bean article, but I couldn't really bring up beans and not bring up rice. Together, they provide 9 essential amino acids. Some of the beans, like soybeans, have all the 9 essential amino acids, but most of them don't. Rice and beans together provide a complete protein. They're a great base for found or foraged foods like garden produce, eggs, or game. They both store without refrigeration. They both have a 30-year shelf life if stored properly, and they have a proven track record. Most Central and South American countries have eaten beans and rice daily for thousands of years. Poor nations such as Brazil eat a diet of just beans and rice with the occasional addition of vegetables, meat, or eggs, and it's inexpensive. So this is not a judgment thing here. I actually read an article written by a guy in English, but he was from Sao Paulo, and he was actually a little bit more direct than that even. Can you survive on just beans and rice? This article is about beans, but the awesomeness of beans and rice as a combination can't be overlooked. When it comes to emergency food storage, not only will beans and rice store for up to 30 years, but they also provide 9 essential amino acids and are considered a complete protein source. People worldwide survive on just beans and rice, but do not get all the nutrients necessary for a healthy body. Supplementing with meat or eggs for fat and garden produce for micronutrients would make for a complete nutrition. So you can survive on just beans and rice for a long time, but you aren't getting everything you need. You do need to supplement. So there's some resources down here. LDS Preparedness Manual. That's a solid resource. And there's a link to a comprehensive Ready Squirrel article down here. How much food to stockpile per person. I hope you guys enjoyed this article. Let me know if you have any suggestions or questions in the comments down below. I hope you have a great day, and I appreciate you hanging with me. Take care, and I'll see you next time.